Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so I ask you guys a question to start our notes off today. And is when you say where you're from, where do you say you're from? Somebody asks you're at a conference, at a place, at an airport, whatever. They ask you where you're from. What do you say? Do you say your city? Do you say your school, your state, your country? What do you actually say? Think about it. Actually, write this down on your piece of paper right now. Why don't you? Okay? And tell me why. Why do you identify yourself as that? Like, I remember when I was went to first college, I asked, well, where are you from? I would say Shawano. Well, I actually wouldn't say Shawano. I'd say Green Bay because nobody actually knew where Shawano was. When I was out of state, down Louisiana for a while, we asked, where are you from? I'd say Wisconsin. You know, that kind of thing. So the question is, where do you identify yourself from? Write down your notes for me. We'll talk about this first thing in class. The reason I'm asking you this question, it comes down to the idea of Greece and how ancient Greece organized their people. In classical Greece, so a time period after 750 BCE, after this time of Homer we started talking about, it is not a united country. It is not like the United States we think of it as today. Instead, it was random city-states that all kind of had some similar Greek traits to them. Maybe they all spoke a same version of Greek. Maybe they all worshiped the same kind of Greek gods. That'd be about it we're talking, okay? That'd be identifying you as a Greek, possibly. The biggest thing here, your loyalty, though, was to your city above all else. It was not saying, I'm a Greek. It was not saying, you know, I'm a Greek person, whatever kind of thing. It's, I'm an Athenian. I'm a Spartan. I'm a Corinthian. Those kind of things. Okay? Loyalty to your city-state. And actually, it wasn't just a city. It was a city-state called the Polis. And there's been the city itself and all the land around it. And so these little polis, which are kind of these little city-states, are what make up the main foundation of ancient Greece. So here's an example of what a polis would look like. So you have the main city in here, and all the city around it would be kind of the agricultural areas. This is actually the city-state of Athens. A few things that were in almost every single city-state. One thing would be temples. So here you see temples, like the Parthenon in Athens is very, very important, being a temple to the goddess Athena. Down here, temple of Hephaestus, the god of ironworking and metallurgy. You have Zeus's temple down here. These kind of temples and altars, those kind of things were very, very important in Greek culture. So every single god or goddess in Greek mythology usually had a temple in the city. And every single city would have had one main god or goddess. So for Athens, it was a goddess of wisdom, which was Athena. She was also a goddess of victory and war, those kind of things. Sparta would have been Ares, god of war. And so all these different gods and goddesses would have like a sponsor god for the city. Now, usually, at least in Athens for sure, some other place, you'd have a spot called the Acropolis. That was the highest place in the city. Basically kind of like a stronghold that when the crap hit the fan, you had a place to go. And so it's kind of the highest place in the city, the easiest place to defend. You could hide during an attack by an enemy, whether it be an outside enemy or it be another polis. You also have what's called the Agora. Here's the Agora right here. And so this here was going to be kind of the open place for people to assemble. It was going to be the shopping area, the marketplace. People would go there to shop, to trade, to sit and talk politics, to enjoy each other's company, those kind of things. So you'd see men go there, in Athens at least, and talk politics and discuss life and those kind of things. You'd see slaves go there to get different goods for their owners, those kind of deals. So all those kind of things here happened in the polis. You kind of see the structure of the polis here. Now, one thing that most polis had was a city wall, and every single polis had city walls except for Sparta. Sparta was pretty BA, okay? Let's put it that way. They felt they didn't need walls. They were the strongest army, and they didn't need to have walls at all. Here's Athens, though. Look how Athens has multiple city walls. And even as the city grew, they would just move the walls out. So here's the old city limit right here. There's the Agora, and the Agora and the Acropolis. So Agora's down here, Acropolis is here. And over time, they started building these walls out and building more and more walls. They even have something called long walls in Athens because they had a little city called Piraeus down here, which is basically their harbor. And they actually built long walls basically right along this road here to protect that harbor, make sure they always had access to their harbor for their ships, those kind of things. And so all these cities had walls to help protect them from attack and those kind of deals. Now, within the different polis, there were different social classes. And usually at this time, your social class was decided by birth. And there wasn't much chance for you to move up and down. So you, first off, on the very top, you had people who were citizens, usually males born in that city, where you had both political and legal rights. Okay? So as a citizen, you had political and legal rights, your mail, you owned land, those kind of things that made you a citizen with legal rights. You could vote, you could serve in the military, all those kind of things were part of it. Okay, you also had citizens without formal rights. That'd be women and children. They could not own property, which means usually they were not citizens. Only citizens in these cities usually could own property. You also had citizens of other polis. People who would move from place to place, city to city, they could live there, they could be a citizen, but they had no legal rights whatsoever. They couldn't vote if there was voting involved. They couldn't be in government if they could pick people for government, those kind of things. At the very, very bottom, you have your slaves. Okay, slaves are considered property of the owners. Now, some life for slaves was good, some life for slaves was bad. You're considered property, yes, but sometimes some slaves actually had lives that were better than citizens than poor citizens, or citizens with no formal rights. If you had no property, or if you were from another place, if you were a slave for a rich household, your life could be pretty gosh darn good versus trying to scratch by living on a small farm. Now, the thing is, these city-states would actually fight wars with each other. It would almost be kind of like if you have the city-state of Sauk City or Sauk Prairie and the city-state of Baraboo would actually go and fight wars with each other. And a lot of times, the way the men lived is they work their job one season and they fight their wars in the summer, except for Sparta. They went and they fought wars, well, basically all the time. It's kind of how it came down. They would just fight wars every summer, every year-round, train for war year-round basis. So there'll be certain people who might work as a job as a potter, or a job as a mason, job as a sculptor, job as whatever. Okay, you work that job in the wintertime, in the summertime, you put your armor on, and you went and fought wars. Now, the typical Greek soldier was called a hoplite, and a hoplite was a heavy infantry. They wore heavy bronze armor, okay, carried a big, huge shield like this, and carried this big, huge, long spear. And they fought what's called the phalanx formation. If you ever seen the movie 300, you saw the phalanx formation. Here's an example of the phalanx here. Basically, you would line up right tight next to each other, make a huge, big wall of bronze shields, put your spears down, and push and fight each other. We're going to show how this works in class. But that is, we're actually going to fight a battle here in class, what we're going to do. But that is kind of how the phalanx work. Now, they did this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was a way that you really didn't lose a ton of people because you're covered head to toe in bronze. You have very well defended. You're covering each other. And that is one of the big ways that you made sure you kept your people. The armor you wore was actually passed down by family. It was kind of you would wear your dad's armor and he would wear your grandfather's armor, so on and so forth. It was very, very important. Only citizens had that armor. That was kind of one of the big ways to show you were a citizen of that city. Now, the coolest part about these Greek areas is that they actually had gymnasiums. They actually had public places where guys could go and work out, stay fit to go fight in war. They could run, they would wrestle, those kind of things. Weird part, the guys always exercise naked, which is kind of one of those little things like, oh, hey, okay, that kind of deal. But, it was kind of, the gymnasiums were there and present for people to not only, work out, but also talk politics, talk current events, those kind of things. Almost kind of like the men's club, if you will, for those cities. Now, every single polis also started establishing their own colonies. So, like Sparta went and put colonies in Italy, okay, like modern-day Sicily, those kind of places. Athens put colonies in Asia Minor and Turkey, kind of where Troy used to be. Question is why? Think about it. Your polis is a little itty-bitty city, okay? And you need to bring in raw materials, bring in goods for your market. So it's all about the money, and you think about it. And you need to be doing the trade. And we try to control a lot of the different waterways, like between the Hellespont and the Bosphorus, a little strip of water between Asia Minor and Europe. Those are really, really important places so you can control that trade and make sure you keep your trade going. So we talk about how they fight war. There's only two really times that polises would fight wars every summer. There's actually only two times they got along. We'll talk about this in class too. We'll look at an article on this in class. But there's two times the polises got along. One was during wartime when they had a common enemy, which happened once in a great while, especially the Persians. The other time was the Olympics. The Olympics was basically a festival for the gods. They would do it every 4 years, like we do our Olympics today. They call a truce and take a year off to go and you compete and show who's better in a way that's not killing each other. It was all about religious respect, about practicality, a lot of good reasons for the Olympics. We'll talk about that more in class. Now, we talk about democracy a lot, and we're talking about governments in the polises now. I think about the United States being a democracy. I think we were told we're a democracy or a democratic republic, those kind of ideas. Think about our school. Is this a democracy here? Well, you may say no. You're probably right in some cases. The question is, where does our idea of democracy actually come from? And so in ancient Greece, you actually saw three kinds of government in these different little cities. First kind was a tyranny. Basically, you had one really, really rich person come up and seize the power and rule by force. If you cross that person, they got rid of you. They killed you dead. All right? That'd be a tyranny. One person, usually upper class, rich, seizing power, taking power, keeping power, never giving it back. You have an oligarchy where you have a small group of people that rule the city-state. There might be richer people, might be rich merchants, might be a certain family, where it might be, but a small group of people rule that city. And lastly, is democracy, which is rule by the people. So you have a place then where a group of people get together, the entire city gets together and tries to rule. So let's take a look at Sparta first. We're doing a lot of comparison of Athens and Sparta here, two of the bigger city-states. They have an oligarchy where they actually had two kings that shared the power. Essentially, they were basically generals, if you will. Okay, one king was often campaigning out on war, fighting on wars. The other king was at home. They also had other people like judges, they're called ephors, who would judges basically help to run the trials, educate kids. You actually had elders, 28 men over the age of 60. Because remember, if you're age 60 at this point, you're probably a pretty good guy because you survived that long. You survived fighting, those kind of things. And these men would be voted in as being, these elders in this place in Sparta, and they'd get a chance to advise the king, that kind of stuff. When the kings were gone, well, then the ephors got to make the decisions. So we kind of see a small group of power that has small group of people that has power in Sparta. Now, I understand that Sparta is about very isolationist. They kind of want to keep themselves separate. Their people were actually not allowed to travel because they didn't want people to go to other places to do their freedoms. We'll take a look at what freedoms look like in Sparta in class. Now, looking at Athens and democracy, it did not happen overnight. We'll watch a little video on this in class as well, but at 700 BCE, Athens had a lot of problems. They were tyrants. They were rich guys. They owned all the land, and they basically ruled over everything with iron fist. And in the 600s comes a guy named Draco. Draco was one of these tyrants who created very harsh laws, very strict punishments. Have you ever heard somebody be draconian? It's never this guy here, this guy Draco. Examples like if you own a debt to somebody, you didn't pay that debt off, you were sold into slavery. It was very, very strict. Very little minor infractions had huge punishments. Well, as Draco dies away, we see new people come up. A guy named Solon. And Solon was kind of this person who came in, he was going to cancel debts, people loved him, but then he eventually became a tyrant when all the aristocrats got the power. And so you kind of see this idea of when you get power, it stays with you. It keeps you, it makes you this tyrant kind of idea. Until eventually a guy named Cleisthenes came around in 508 BCE. Basically reformed Athens from the tyrants. His idea was to try and make people happier by giving power to the citizens. And essentially he kind of starts things rolling to create the very, very first democracy. And so the way that Athenian democracy worked is there was an assembly. It was a legislature who made the laws. And they were all male citizens. So this was over 18, owned land, you could not be a slave. Okay, that made you a citizen, those three things. So I'd be a citizen. I would not be a citizen because I don't own land here in town. Okay, I rent an apartment, I don't own land, so I would not be a citizen. Okay, I'm over 18, no slaves, but don't have that. Okay, you have to have at least 6,000 citizens together at this hill called the Pix to have a quorum to actually make laws. If they didn't have enough people, they would have a slave run with a rope through the agora, and if that rope was coated in white paint touched you, you had to go to the assembly until they got 6,000 people put together. Now, this assembly was a direct democracy. All citizens could participate in it. Everyone had a chance to speak and discuss the problems. And usually it's pretty simple things. Do we build this? Do we not build this? Do we do this tax? Do we not do this tax? Do we go to war? Do we not go to war? Okay, so it's pretty simple issues to help make these decisions as a big group. Now, when we would vote, we'd be voting either by hand or by secret ballot. Now, if everyone put their hand up, you could tell for sure if things pass, awesome. But if it was too close to call, you did a secret ballot. In the secret ballot, you had these jars, okay, up in front of the assembly, and every single person got one white stone and one black stone. You come up to the front, drop your stone in the jar. They then break the jars, count the stones, and that's how they figure out, how the vote went. And so that's kind of how the democracy worked in Athens. Now, there's also a couple other minor groups in this group. There's a Council of 500, which are basically main job was to make the agenda for the assembly and make sure that thing that they did happen. So it's kind of like almost like a president, if you will. There are 500 of them, but just not as much power in terms of what they did. There were trials as well. If you were accused of a crime, you went to judges, and you actually had a jury trial, which was kind of cool. They basically picked a bunch of people from the agora. You could speak as long as you wanted to, and your jury would be up to 100 people. Now, the jury could decide if you're honest or guilty. The judge decided your punishment, everywhere from whippings to death to banishment. In fact, the worst punishment was not death. It was called ostracism. Basically, if you're causing too much trouble, they kicked you out. You had at least 6,000 people agree on it, but you were banned from the city for at least 10 years. That was by far your worst punishment of all of Athens. There you go, guys. Have these ready for